on the year 2012, a console known as the Nintendo Wii U was released. But within this underrated console were some absolute bangers. You got Mario 3D World, Rayman Legends, Pikmin 3, We Don't Talk About You, and the list can go on and on about the absolute dump truck of amazing games on that console. But there's one game in particular out of this entire catalogue of the Wii U that stood out particularly to me as one of the hit titles: Splatoon. With its wacky yet fun aesthetic and unique mechanics, Splatoon was a splash, no pun intended, of a fresh take of a shooter genre. I could sit here and talk all about Splatoon, but to get to the point, it was a fun and great game, but felt a bit basic in most ways. In 2017, we got a sequel, Splatoon 2, which expanded the experience with a brand new mode, Salmon, and later down the line got DLC as well. And the game was still great, and thanks to Salmon made the overall experience have a bit more variety, and the only real issue with the game was the special design, map rotations, copy and pasted story mode, and some other questionable decisions, but it was still a great game with a unique style. And now here we are with the prequel, Splatoon 3. And as a long-time veteran who played both Splatoon 1 and Splatoon 2, I thought it'd be fun to stitch up an entire early thoughts video on this game. Now, a lot of you are probably going to be sitting there thinking, well, why now? There's already a ton of reviews out there about the game already, so why are you so late? Well, first of all, this is my personal opinion as a fan of the franchise, and just looking at the different aspects of the game and see how I actually feel about them. So of course, I wanted to see what the game had to offer from beginning to end. So yes, there will indeed be some spoilers of, the hero mode and, whatnot, of course. So that's a heads up. So with that out of the way, let's start simple, shall we? First of all, I think we should talk about Splatsville, the main hub area. It's quite nice. I like how the area feels overall. Although my one issue with some areas is that they feel pretty pointless. Like this area. Like seriously, what is this area for? And what purpose does it serve? And I know that it'll probably be used for some DLC, but at the moment it just feels sometimes so empty. But overall, the hub area is very nice and I really like it. It feels more alive in some ways, especially during Splatfest. To the side we have the shops, which function the exact same as I usually do, with one new store that we'll touch on later. But getting weapons actually works a bit differently in this game. To get weapons you need a Sheldon/weapon license, which will allow you to purchase a weapon. But here's the thing, if you reach a level in which Sheldon will recommend a weapon to you, it will only cost for one license. But if you want a weapon that's unlocked in a later level, you could easily just get 3 licenses and bam, you have that weapon. This is a really great addition for players of the first 2 games, so if they find a weapon they like in the past, they can just get it from the get-go. Merch is back and he pretty much functions the exact same, but I'm not going to really complain because, once again, he's very useful in this. We also got a new feature called Table Turf Battles, which is a okay-ish addition. It didn't really have anything to do with the actual gameplay, but it doesn't bite, so there's nothing wrong. However, I do think Table Turf Battles does overstay its welcome, because it does indeed have a leveling up system that in the late game is so slow and grindy that I just usually ignore it and just play the actual game modes like the online or Salmon instead. Something much funner. The main aim of the game is to cover more turf than your opponent does, which is a really cool concept, but there are indeed some things that do indeed have the experience by, some fold, of course. First of all, you'll sometimes get turf being placed on top of each other, and it comes completely random without knowledge, and it can get pretty annoying when it comes to putting down a piece and then your opponent just puts that crap on top of yours. Like seriously, a dice roll feature or like a coin flip feature would really help here. The game also feels kind of restrictive in some ways, but maybe that's just a me thing. Table Turf Battles also have an online feature, although it's not that in-depth. You usually just fight people's decks and not the actual player who created it, which is a big shame considering I think it would add a lot more to the game in general. So Table Turf Battle isn't the most astonishing new feature. In fact, it would oftentimes go into the feeling of unfun most of the time, either because it's too easy or RNGs is bending you over. But it's something unique, which is always nice. I guess. Just to get this out the way, amiibos, how are they? I mean, they're still nowhere as good as the Splatoon 1 amiibos with the extra content you actually get to play. The amiibos here don't really offer that much outside of saving your loadouts, which you can do already in the game without actually spending a single penny, or you can just take, photos of them in the hub area. They also instantly give you the gear they feature, which is nice, but I kind of wish you actually had a bigger incentive to actually go buy these things because, you actually have to pay money to actually get them. So with that out the way and the hub area completely covered, let's get to the actual gameplay, shall we? Like all Splatoon games, Splatoon 3 has a single player mode that introduces new players to the mechanics and gives them the know-how to improve for online battles, or they have no internet connection so they just play hero mode instead. The synopsis is that the Great Zapfish is stolen again, and old Cuttlefish blames once again on the Octarians, and after beating 3 levels, you are tossed into a fight with DJ Octavio. After beating the malicious DJ, he tells you and Cuttlefish that he wasn't responsible for the Great Zapfish's disappearance, and then the floor suddenly gives in and grows fuzzy ooze, and then you die. Just kidding, you just fall and get separated from Cuttlefish and DJ Octavio. After the fall, you end up in Alterna and meet Callie Marie and the captain, who was Agent 3 in the past games. When you arrive in Alterna, the game really starts off, and now the levels are more akin to the Octo expansion, as well as countless other things to check out. Later in the game, you'll bump into Deep Cut, which are indeed the new idols of Splatoon 3. But the catch is, when they're not hosting the news, they're actually bandits, and have followed you down the exact same hole you fell down in, and now wish to raid Alterna and all of its secrets. So with thieves on the loose, and many unanswered questions about the fuzzy ooze, your Inkling must face off against a very hairy situation. See what I did there? As I said, the levels are heavily based on the Octo expansion, with some interesting concepts, and arguably some of the most fun levels in the series, especially with the Zipcaster and Crab Tank levels. But of course, there are a handful of challenging levels that may take a few attempts to get a hang of. However, the replayability is pretty non-existent, even with most levels having free weapons to use, since there's almost no real reason to come back to them, which is a bummer, and I kinda wish they were a bit more interesting in that case. But what is especially nice is that you don't need to play every single level in the campaign to get to the final boss. You could legit skip a world and move on to the next. I think this is a good change, since if you bump into a hard level you can't complete, you can just move on to the next world if you fancy. However, it does make some of the levels feel pretty pointless unless you're trying to level up. But thankfully, I'm a beast, and I've played all the levels, including every single weapon you can get on each and every single one of them. You're welcome. Leveling up is also improved, which is a nice addition. You increase your level by cleaning furballs and just playing in general. Overall, I think the system is good, but it does make the boss fights pretty easy, which we will touch on later. Overall, the levels are great, but I do think it feels a bit too similar to the Octo expansion, and some levels are literally just stripped from the Octo expansion. Looking at you, Bob Sculpture level and flip and shoot all the target levels. So yeah, the levels aren't mind-blowingly impressive, but to be honest, the levels aren't really the heavy lifters of the hero mode. That award goes to the open world / site to explore. This, to me, is by far the most massive glow up so far, because there's so much to uncover and check out in these flipping sites. In fact, in Site 3 you actually get Ice Physics, which is always what I wanted in Splatoon, since I think it would make a ton of potential having elemental hazards and for, level designs and challenges, so there's a lot there. But I'm gutted that there's no levels that actually utilize this. Of course, we have the fuzzballs, these cubic barriers that once they make contact with you is an instant game over, and to remove these nasty messes is where your small fried up little buddy comes into play. By giving him enough power eggs, he can eat away all the fuzzy ooze you aim at. Of course, Little Buddy has more functions outside of eating fuzzballs. He's also able to act as a sub-weapon in some missions, but also acts as a way of finding hidden collectibles in the main sites, which is really cool and makes Little Buddy feel more like an actual companion. Speaking of collectibles, they return, but they have taken a harsh toll considering you can only find them in the open world sites and whatnot. And the fact that the level's more akin to the Octo expansion wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, and that is a bit of a shame considering it would add a little bit more to the levels. But as they stand, yeah, they're good. I do like capsules with decorations for your locker, that's pretty neat. Sardinium's back and is required to upgrade your gear. Music tracks litter the land, and once collected, add to the music of the site you're in. The sunken scrolls are also back, but they're kind of okay-ish. I only feel like they're really here to cover the new characters and not a whole lot outside of that. You can indeed use them as stickers in your locker, which is kind of cool, but I would argue that one of the new collectibles actually overshadows Sunken Scrolls entirely: the Alterna logs. Each log is like a chapter of story, and once I was done reading one, I so badly wanted to see what the next log was actually saying and how the story actually played out, and revealed some really key lore bombs that really got me off guard, and it's such a really cool idea. Overall, Alterna logs are a great time. Now, since this is a video about my personal opinions on the whole game, I will be covering the end and final boss, so if there's anyone that hasn't played the game and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your chance to bail out into like a certain timestamp where I actually do all the online features. You have been warned. So the ending, the climax of the story. It was pretty anticlimactic. The level leading up to the final boss is still so similar to your expansion, which isn't bad once again, but it would be so nice to see something unique. But it was fun, but it didn't really offer a whole lot, but once again, I must address, it was still a fun time, nonetheless. But then Mr. Grizz himself, oh dear. What happened here? First of all, he's pretty predictable, and his reveal just felt so flat, it wasn't even funny. And the thing is that throughout the story, he does nothing to stop or sabotage your progress, and overall he felt pretty forgettable. Even going through the story knowing full well he was going to be the main antagonist, I genuinely forgot about him until it was time to face him or when he talked in the end of each boss fight. Overall, he's my least favourite Splatoon villain due to the amount of missed potential he is, and doesn't improve on the story, character building, and urgency which this franchise badly needs to do for its main baddies. And the thing is that I don't really care about the characters. Sure, I like them, but I don't feel sympathy or anything because our heroes simply don't struggle to quell a threat, which sucks because I feel like that's another thing this franchise is missing and, honestly, really needs. We need a threat that actually feels overwhelming and actually proves to be an actual, well, threat. And yes, I know Captain Cuttlefish is turned into a realistic squid, which is cursed, and I guess that's the game's way of saying he's dead, but look at the mother sucker. He's fine. And thus I feel no impact or anything playing the story. And yes, I'm not saying we should lose a character in any way, shape or form, but some sort of sabotage or some sort of unexpected ambush for a main antagonist could really help a Splatoon story mode. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How about that final boss? And oh boy, was it so easy it fizzled out as soon as I started to move, because despite this boss battle taking place in space, you seriously have no low gravity, which isn't bad, but it's so frustrating they didn't include it in this fight, and honestly it would have made this fight stick out more, and it would be way more fun. In fact, this was my very reaction when I actually learnt the hard way.
Now come here so I can break you. Oh, I don't even have low gravity! Gravity!
So yeah, the boss fight wasn't all that great, and right after that you pile Octobot King and suck up all the foibles of Mr. Grizz. And this part is insanely annoying for the first time thanks to the controls of the spaceship and constantly getting ambushed by enemies. Seriously, it's a headache. Speaking of the Octobot King, another big seller of this hero mode is that DJ Octavio is on your side, and this feature is pretty downplayed in my opinion, considering he's only seen in the first parts of the game, disappears for the rest of it, and then comes back at the very last minute. This is just a nitpick, but I kind of feel like they could have expanded the whole entire baddie work with the good guys a wee bit better in my opinion, since at the moment it just feels like an afterthought here, and other games like Sparks of Hope executed this a lot better in my opinion. Another jab at the final boss is the new edition of Calamari Incantation, which is easily the worst one in my opinion. Yes, call me insane or cold-hearted, but Spicy Calamari Incantation easily beats Remix in my opinion almost every single regard. I know they were trying to do like a big collab thing with Deep Cut, Squid Sisters and DJ Octavio, but it honestly just sounded like a mess to me, and even then, it lacked the very big oomph that the second one had. So in all honesty, simplicity is the better option here. Another thing I want to mention that is also a nitpick is that we never actually see any new enemies. Yes, we see new types of Octo Troopers, but we don't get any new categories of foe. Since I feel like with the title of Return of the Mammalians, I feel like we should see something strange and unfamiliar. And in return, I think would actually make Mr. Grizz stand out more as, a unique villain, instead of just having, basic Octo Troopers like the other two. And it would be a breath of fresh air considering that we fought this enemy not once, not twice, but literally 4 times in a row. Also, the ending credits were just a letdown entirely, and yes, this isn't really much of a big deal like the other two. I just kind of feel like it just wasn't fun. You're just there shooting crap into space, and it just kind of feels pointless in that case. But after a you might be saying, stop talking about negative things and cheer up, Julia. And to that I must say, yeah, I know, I need to get this stuff on my chest. However, if you want me to talk about something positive, then After Turner is the most brutal but fun level in the entire game. It has a mixture of advanced platforming, target shooting, and fighting in it, and it has up to 4 sections each with only 1 choke point at the beginning of each one. It's a rather hard challenge to do, but it's not impossible. To be honest, I would argue that Champions Road or Darker Side is harder, but I still bloody love this edition and I hope we get a boss blitz level in the DLC or the next game. Overall, the hero mode has a smooth time with some features receiving a massive glow up and some things improving in some aspects, although I think the levels aren't groundbreaking or impressive because in some cases I feel like the Octo expansion had more creative concepts for its levels. Don't get me wrong, Return of the Mammalians has some of the most funnest levels in the franchise, period. But there's also a lot of things that are just taken straight out of Octo expansion that doesn't really make it feel, special. I also feel like they need to add a bit more incentive to completing levels, considering after being levels you can just tend to move on and never come back to them. Even when you do all the levels with all the weapons, you're still kind of rewarded with almost nothing, and your time kind of just feels a little bit wasted in some aspects. So I wish they gave them, a bit more of a deeper purpose to make them a bit more interesting and, give the player some real motivation. But with the single player out the way, why don't we actually talk about the cool stuff, why don't we? Turf Wars are back as well as ranked with many improvements and quality of life changes. First thing I wanted to touch on is waiting for the games to load up. So do you remember that crappy loading screen in most Splatfest games where you just have to sit there for minutes at a time? Well, now you can actually play while waiting for the matches, and this is a pretty solid addition. You can practice while waiting, which is great, and it does include some very handy additions like more elevated platforms, a super large invisible dummy to see your damage output, and my favourite addition by far is a robot that mimics your shooting and bomb throwing. You can even see other players while waiting for the next game, which is great. So the lobby is an actual improvement, and the lobby does have a couple other features. Buying food is still a thing, and now you can watch replays of your overall performance at the terminal, which is a handy feature, especially if you want to save a game where you've been, cleaning house, essentially. Turf Wars are still the same as usual, which isn't a problem though. I will admit it's not my favourite. They still have the fresh meter, which is fun I guess, and they even added a new star feature showing how much you played with that weapon, which in return rewards you with stickers and badges for your splash tag. Ranked is back, and I have to say, it's actually fun now. The ranking up system is a nice change of pace from Splatoon 1's and 2's crappy ranking system. Instead of being judged by your wins or losses, Splatoon 3's ranking system is based on personal performance. which is great because you don't feel gutted every single time you lose. Well, kinda. Winning does give you a huge boon, so you'll of course strive to win, of course, but it does feel so satisfying to get most splats in a game. It's like candy to my eyes. They also did some quality to life changes to the game modes as well, mostly for Clam Blitz and Rainmaker. In Clam Blitz they reduced the clams required to make a super clam from 10 to 8. And you can see how many clams a person has on both teams, making Clam Blitz a lot more bearable than its first days in Splatoon 2. Rainmaker now has checkpoints that are required to actually push the objective and allows for games to last a bit longer. Overall, it's a nice fix for some gamers that didn't get enough love in the past. Well, still not the biggest fan of Clam Blitz. Of course, if we're talking about online battles, we may as well touch on the weapons, and especially the new weapons. So let's start with the new weapons, the Tri-Stringer and Splatana. They're okay, I guess, but I find them both underwhelming. The Tri-Stringer is easily the best out of the two classes in my opinion, but holy crap, it's not a perfect weapon, and it's pretty much a bootleg charger with explosive projectiles at the end. And when you're fighting against a Stringer, it's instantly infuriating trying to avoid all the crap it shoots out. Seriously, this thing is so campy. The Reflux is a decent weapon, but I feel like it gets outcompeted by other weapons, and its only saving grace is, yeah. The Splatana is just overall a strange case. It has a mid-range swipe attack, but also has a charge slash that can instantly splat anyone if they're up close enough. However, it just gets squashed by anything that has longer range or can splat it way before the Splatana can do anything. Not to mention it has a pretty mediocre kit as well. The Stamper, I will admit, is better, but it still gets trampled by longer ranged options, even with its better stats and definitely better kit. If you're wondering about the other weapons, they pretty much function the same, and shooters still feel a bit too dominant, but hopefully that will change in time. Of course, with main weapons, we also have sub-weapons, and Splatoon only has one new sub-weapon, the Angle Shooter. The Angle Shooter is a okayish sub. It's pretty gimmicky and it's rather situational, but it has a use. It creates an incline once if anyone hits it, exposes their location, in which Point Sensor does a better job in terms of a set area, but Angle Shooter can do it at distance, so at least it has a benefit there. I'll admit it's a bit of a shame they only get one new sub-weapon, but I have hope they'll add more. On the other hand, there are a butt ton of new special weapons, and I have to admit, they're all pretty well designed. A lot of them require a good amount of skill and positioning, well except the big bubbler. That one actually kind of is a bit of a pain to deal with in tower control. And Zipcast I think does need a bit of an extra oomph to make it a little bit more threatening in my opinion. The only bad thing are the specials actually returning from Splatoon 2. Inkstorm and Inkjet are good returning specials, but I feel like Ultra Stamp is complete garbage. Tent Missiles are still easily by far the best and most obnoxious specials in the game, and Booyah Bomb is good, but I feel like it clashes with Triple Ink Strike in its function. We also don't have any new variations of weapons at launch sadly, but hopefully we'll get some down the road in an update. The Squid Roll and Squid Surge are very nice additions and really help out with advanced movement and so on. I just kinda wish some classes that didn't benefit from the Squid Roll had some new features, because as a Splatling main I can tell you that outside of backing up and dodging Killer Whale 5.1s, Splatling gains nothing from the new mobility options, as well as a couple other classes like Brothers. But overall, it's a great addition, and it feels so satisfying to splat someone after a Squid Roll. It just asserts dominance. Another new addition that's found in the lobby are lockers. This is a fun addition. It's really fun to make your locker look nice and organized, or you could just do that, I guess. But overall, I like this new addition. But hold on a blooming second, how do you get decorations for your lockers? Well, in the new store Hot Lanterns, which not only sells decorations but also sells stickers and different colours for your locker. This will also allow people to actually use their cash to buy things they are actually interested in after they bought everything else that's actually in the game. It prevents cash from just sitting there, just like in the other two games as well. Another good way of getting rid of excess cash is by using the Charlotte machine in the lobby. This actually will give a plethora of rewards, which will range from new nameplates, titles, stickers, decorations, ability chunks, and tickets you can actually use. The
big new mode released in Splatoon 2, Salmon makes a comeback and made some nice quality of life changes and improvements. First of all, just like waiting for games in the lobby, you wait in a training area until the game is ready to begin. Salmon pretty much functions the exact same. You drop in, get a random weapon, get the egg quota, survive the wave, rinse and repeat until the shift is over. First off, the new feature is the ability to throw eggs. This isn't the most mind-blowing addition, but it's actually really handy and even has a drawback. Once you fired a golden egg, it costs the exact same amount of ink as firing a sub-weapon. There's also 4 new bosses along with the cast of original bosses that returned. The fish stick is essentially a sprinkler on steroids, and is really easy to take out, but if left unchecked, it can cripple mobility, making your team much more vulnerable to other boss attacks. The flip-flopper is just Splat Zone, so this dude jumps out of the slime and hovers in the air while shooting a ring and will proceed to jump into it, splatting any poor sap caught in it. To defeat him, you must paint the ring before he jumps into it. Then he'll face plant into the ground, and it's pretty much a wrap for him unless you ran out of ink. The last 2 bosses are probably my favourite bosses in terms of design. The Big Shot, yeah, get over it, is a pretty fun boss. He essentially camps a shoreline and fires iron balls that create shockwaves similar to the Wavemaker special. The fun part is that his very cannon is capable of launching golden eggs all the way from the shoreline to somewhat close to your basket, making him easily one of my favourite bosses in the entire game. The Salmon lid is another fantastic boss, which focuses less on splatting and more on supporting the horde. It functions very similar to the Big Bubbler, and when you try to approach it from underneath, it will try to crush you, which then opens the opportunity to get on its lid and take out the pilot. But easily the best thing about the Salmon lid is that if any Salmonid is below it and it tries to crush you, it will instantly splat them. Yes, that also includes bosses. It's just amazing and easily one of my favourite bosses along with the Big Shot. And hopefully they'll add new bosses throughout the lifespan of this game, so Salmon has something new every now and then. Because the one bummer about Salmon in Splatoon 2 is that they added no new bosses and we only had the ones of the base roster. So I really hope they expand this time of, the actual boss Salmonid roster now. You may also encounter a special wave every now and then, with all the original events from the previous game return, such as the Mothership, Glowflies, Gorillas, Chococ Charge, and etc. But we also have 2 new waves, such as Mudmouths and Tornado, which are interesting in their own right. Mudmouths is pretty fun. You have to throw bombs into the mouths, and Tornado is my favourite of the 2 and utilises the egg throw mechanic, but it is quite easy. Overall, Salmon still functions the same, but with some new fresh additions. Oh, something I also really want to mention is that Salmon is a lot more difficult. And when I mean by a lot more difficult, I mean a lot more difficult. And it's a very much appreciated addition because, as an experienced player from the first 2 games, Salmon can feel a bit easy. So, very much appreciated there. However, the best new thing about Salmon Next Wave is when he appears. Cho-Ozuna. Cho-Zuna? Cho-Ozuna. I don't know how you pronounce it, but regardless, he's a killer addition and always has me coming back for more. And every time he appears, there's a feeling of excitement rather than panic, and I flippin' love it. Cho-Ozuna, I'll call him that for now, isn't the most dangerous Salmonid, but he's easily the tankiest foe you'll face, having a ludicrous amount of health, and the only real significant way of dealing any sort of damage to him is by throwing golden eggs, meaning you have to multi-manage spawning bosses while also trying to stay alive yourself. Cho-Ozuna is pretty hard to take down, especially when you're playing solo with a team of randoms. After defeating Cho-Ozuna, or when he gets away, which is probably the most likely, you'll be given scales. There are in total 3 types of scales: bronze scales, silver scales, and gold scales. Bronze scales are pretty common, silver scales are rarer, and I haven't got a single gold scale, which kind of tells you how rare they are. Anyway, you use these scales to purchase new stuff at the counter, and you can get some Salmon Run themed decorations and stickers for your locker. New work suits, nameplates, so now there's actually something to grind for in Salmon Run now. Big Run isn't out yet, but I feel like I need to get this out the way here. From the looks of it, it just looks like Salmon Run but on a multiplayer map, which is okay-ish at the moment, but maybe there's a curveball that they'll throw, so I'll keep that in mind. And that's pretty much it. Oh wait, there's one more thing to talk about actually. Splatfest is back and pretty much once again functions the exact same as the other two, excluding the fact that you now have 3 teams and a new mode, Tricolor Turf Wars. So there's not a whole lot to say except for Tricolor Turf Wars and some little changes. So let's talk about them, shall we? First of all, you can get something called a Festival Clam. These clams increase your chances of getting a 100 times battle, and if the other team has one, you might get a 333 times battle. It's a okay addition, but I'm not too fussed about it really. The real new addition is Tricolor Turf Wars, so let's get some footage of that, shall we? Okay, I'm dead serious. I waited for 2 solid hours trying to find a Tricolor Turf match, and I didn't find a single round. So instead, I'll be recalling some of the experience I had in the test fire matches. It was good, but I do see how it is quite unfair, and I don't think just slapping this mode on regular multiplayer maps is a good idea at all. And they should have something very similar to Shifty Station that could actually, host a good Tricolor Turf War match. But that's all that Splatfest really had to share, really. I was kind of hoping you could play ranked modes in Splatfest in the Pro category, since Pro just kind of feels like more Turf War. But alas, it's good, but it's not my cup of coffee for sure. Splatoon 3 is a fantastic game, with a lot of content and an active player base. The game is an absolute blast, has a ton of replayability with the weapons and multiplayer, and Salmon Run is better than ever, with a new system that allows you to constantly grind for better rewards. But I'm not going to sit here and not be honest. For Splatoon 3 didn't really impress me. It's better than its predecessors for obvious reasons, but I can't sit here and lie that it's not mind-blowing or impressive for me. The hero mode was great, but it didn't impress me. The multiplayer is better, but it didn't impress me. Salmon Run has some new features. I think you see where I'm going with this. And that's how I feel about Splatoon 3, as a veteran from the first 2 games. So in all honesty, I feel like at least at the moment Splatoon 3 feels more like Splatoon 2 Deluxe than a true sequel. Yes, they added things like table turf battles and lockers, but the thing is, they're nothing to do with gameplay, they're just side activities. That's like saying Squid Beats from Splatoon 2 was a new addition or major part of the game, because it wasn't. Not saying we shouldn't have these features, they're cool and very much appreciated, but they're not what I would call sequel potential in my opinion. Salmon Run just feels enhanced more than anything, even with features like Tronzuna. If anything, the new specials are the only feature that make the game feel like a sequel, and even then they still have returning specials as well, which stick out like a sore thumb. Hell, if anything, I feel like that Splatoon 3 is an apology from the developers and how they ruined Splatoon 2. But it doesn't deter this from being a fantastic game. It's easily one of the best shooters on the Switch, and it's definitely better than... What the hell? And if you're a new player, I highly recommend this, considering it's just a better Splatoon 2, and getting Splatoon 2 at this state would probably be considered as a disservice to yourself. Yeah, sure, it may feel the same to some people, but the benefits from this game makes Splatoon 3 feel like the definitive Splatoon game on the Switch, and you lose nothing by getting the better version. Of course, I do have some pity for Splatoon 2, but Nintendo will be Nintendo. In fact, the best way I could describe my feelings for Splatoon 3 at the moment is this. Splatoon 3 is like buying a delicious vanilla ice cream. It's the same thing, but it still is good, and look, it even has some chocolate sauce in it, making it way better. But you're kind of sitting there going like, is that it? And kinda wish there was a bit more to it. That's a very weird way of saying it. Yeah, I'll probably leave it at that. If I was going to rate the game, I would give it a solid 8.9 out of 10. That also concludes my thoughts on the game at the moment. Of course, the game has updates scheduled, so of course I'll cover that and probably will do a video when the game is finished updating, and the DLC coming out of course. As for me, I'll cover some niche topics in Splatoon, as well as maybe covering over some games I have a big interest in. So from Afroling, signing out.